Hola, buenos días. I'm afraid that's all I can say in Spanish, so forgive me. It's very good to be here to share one of Dircom's most important days, the launch of the yearbook. And I bring you greetings from the Global Alliance, and we're very excited about coming here to Madrid in September and looking forward to it. Greetings also from the United Kingdom. I have a special message for you. So if England doesn't win the World Cup, we hope that Spain does. Okay, thank you. Okay. I've been asked to share my thoughts on global trends in corporate communications. And it's been my privilege over the last 2 years to visit about 18 countries all over the world, from Australasia to South America, to Scandinavia, Africa, Europe. And the trends I'm going to talk about, I see all over the world. And I'm not going to go into much detail. My colleagues have already done that for you. But I want to give you a sort of broad perspective of what's going on in corporate communications. And my observation is that these trends are operating at 2 levels. We have some big trends which set the backcloth for our work in corporate communications, and then there are some trends which affect our everyday work as corporate communications professionals. So I'm going to talk about 4 big trends, and then I'm going to talk about some of the smaller trends. I'm not going to talk about all the trends, otherwise we'd be here until 1 o'clock this afternoon, and I know that I'm standing between you and cocktails, so I need to be quick. Okay, so let's have a look at the 4 big trends first. We live in a world where communications is central. There is no large organization or public sector organization or not-for-profit organization now that hasn't professionalized its communications. And increasingly small organizations are having to do that as well. And it seems to me that this is great news for us, because the global figure for growth in our industry is about 12% a year. And if we think that we're living in a time of recession, that's a fantastic achievement. I can't think of any other profession that is growing as quickly as corporate communications. And if we think that there are 1 million practitioners in China alone, that gives us an indication of where some of the areas of growth are. And my colleagues again have told you a lot about where the new emerging areas of growth are, particularly in South America, in Asia, and also in Africa. And if I tell you that 2 organizations, 2 countries have approached us in the last year in the Global Alliance, one of which is a communist country and still very closed, who are wanting to set up a professional association, and another country in Asia who have said that they want to set up a professional association. It shows that even in communities, and I'm not going to name them because it's inappropriate to do that just at the moment, but even in countries where communication is very closed and where maybe the political environment is very tight, there are movements to professionalize in our profession, which is great news for us. So the next big trend, I would say, is that, again, in several countries now, we are seeing the corporate communications department taking on a much more strategic role. There are more public relations and corporate communications practitioners operating at board level than ever more before. And that's driven by 2 main things. First of all, organizations know that they have to be more accountable and open, not only to their stakeholders, but to society at large. So that is driving chief executives to seek communications advice of the highest level of professionalism. And the second thing, more positively, is that organisations and CEOs are seeing a great opportunity to actually build collaborative relationships with stakeholders and with society. And these are productive relationships where they understand that increasingly their organisation is part of a network that can offer resources to them and credibility to them and help build their reputation. And therefore, again, communications is regarded as more and more important. So we see that this new way of operating for organisations is opening up opportunities for us. And the question for us is not where are the opportunities, but do we have the capability, the skills and the knowledge within our professional community to be able to capitalise on those opportunities? And that's a challenge to us. The third big trend that I would note is that the world of communication is becoming much more complex. The world has always been complicated, but that's different from being complex. When things are complicated, you can take them step by step by step. When things are complicated, everything happens together. It's intertwined. And the World Economic Forum has identified over 80 issues which are facing the world at the moment, which impact on us and our organisations, and they're all intertwined. So if you think about an issue like water shortage in the world today, that is driving mass migration of communities. It is driving global conflict. And as people look for new certainties in the world, they are turning to fundamentalism, activism, nationalism, which again is creating great issues for us. So in this globalized world, these intertwined issues and the complexities form the backcloth to our work as communicators, because whatever is going on in the world is always reflected in our professional work. The second thing that I would note about complexity is interconnection. And by that, I mean that life used to be relatively siloed. So our social life was different from our political life, was different from economic life. Now those things are merging together. And you know, as well as I do, that the age when you can separate out those areas is long gone. So what's happening in social media is impacting on economic development and on political developments, as well as people's social lives. The world is increasingly interdependent, and I need say no more than financial crisis. We know that a crisis in America has triggered a global recession. Well, actually, that's not true. It's a European and Western recession. In other parts of the world, there hasn't been a recession, but it is changing our world. And the fourth element here is that our world is increasingly global, and something that we are beginning to detect, and the presentations that we've just heard reinforce this, is that power is shifting from the west to the east and from the north to the south. And that's a new reality which we in Western Europe are going to have to get used to. That new players are coming onto the globe which are making our lives very complicated, because we in the West are not driving the agenda as we used to do in the past. And that's a crucial difference for us that we're going to have to get used to. We will become the second-class citizens, and that's new for us. And the fourth biggest trend that I would note is the pressure of time. So it's not just that we have to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year, but the volume of stuff that is coming towards us from all sorts of new players, particularly online influencers, is making our world very, very difficult. It means we can never relax for a second. And this is a reality now that confronts us every day of our lives. And it's very difficult for us to begin to differentiate between what's really important, what's a trend, and what's trivial. and what is the issue of the day that's going to disappear. And the challenge for us is about how do we carve out time for reflection? How do we, in this really busy world that is getting faster and faster, take the time to stand back, to understand what's really going on, to be able to advise our chief executives of the real issues that we have to spend time on and focus on. And something that some friends and I and another academic, Tony Muzzi-Falcone, have been thinking about quite carefully, I'd be very interested to hear your views on this, is how we work out a world where we can operate in fast time and slow time. Fast time, immediate, dealing with the issues, but also slow time, where we have time to consider what the issues and real trends are. Okay, so if growth, strategic role, complexity and the pressure of time are some of the big issues, what are the things that are affecting our day-to-day lives then? So some of the smaller trends. Well, first of all, changes in communication are obvious. Channels, there's been a proliferation of channels, and you know them all, and I'm not going to go through them. But what do we draw from that is that actually the meeting places where we all meet are getting less and less as channels become fragmented. There used to be a time when I went into the office and I would talk to my colleagues about what they saw on television last night. I can't do that anymore. It doesn't happen. They're looking at television at all different times and they're using all sorts of different channels to do it. So where, as professional communicators, do we find those common areas where we can have sensible conversations with our stakeholders, becoming increasingly challenging for us? And communication is multimodal. You know, we have a video, voice, words, pictures. And the latest thinking on this is that communication has to impact on people in 7 different ways. 7 different ways in order for it to have real impact on them. So when we're talking to stakeholders, you know, just the written communication is no good anymore. They have to hear it 3 times and in 7 different ways for it to have a real impact on them. And then, of course, there's the move to mobile, tablets, smartphones, etc. I've seen you all on your smartphones this morning. And the way that data is being accessed and aggregated and shared is going through a revolution. At the moment, only 20% of people have access to mobile technology. But that rise is going like this. It's exponential. And it will become a fact of life for most people within 2 or 3 years. And then I draw from that actually the visual is taking on more and more impact for us. The visual really important because it has an ability to tell stories in a way that other media don't. It has an ability to aggregate data in powerful infographics and present data in compelling ways. And you can pack into a short space of time an incredible amount of information through visual. So if we move on then to some of the implications for our practice, it's really interesting that journalists now are turning towards corporate organizations, the enemy, to find jobs. And the growth in brand journalism is exploding. There are more journalists employed by organizations than there are by media outlets these days. And news from the gatekeepers, the traditional sources, is losing its power as corporations are able to tell compelling stories. And brand journalism is something that is going to impact on us and something we need to become used to and use much more powerfully than we have done in the past. Personalization. So the universe, you probably heard that phrase. The universe now is really, really important. And individuals thinking that they are unique and they want data that's special to them, particular to them. There's too much information coming at them for them to sort it anymore. So the requirement for corporations to personalize that, literally personalize it, is becoming more and more important. and it's the day of wearable technology. I haven't got Google Glasses yet, but it won't be too long. And it's that personal. Creating a universe is the direction that we're travelling in. So another impact for our practice is that the way that we generate partnerships is going to be increasingly important. Partnerships with stakeholders in decision making, in creating solutions for our issues through crowdsourcing those solutions, in solving problems collaboratively with those stakeholders that are meaningful to us, and positively creating communities and a sense of belonging to counter that sense of fragmentation that's coming to a lot of people because they don't feel associated with the world anymore. That is a really powerful role for us to play. And the shift in content is therefore much more about creating a sense of community and about what our organisation's purpose is and what we can contribute, and creating a sense of connection than it is about telling people about the features and benefits of our products. Those days are dead. It's creating something that is meaningful for people that's important now. And therefore, as organisations spend more money on communications, it's clear that we have to get much more adept at measuring the value that communications plays in our organisation. So moving on then to some challenges for us and for our organisations. It's clear this is great news for us as communicators, but there are some real challenges that we need to be honest and serious about. It does mean that we have to give up power as organisations as we move into this new world. The old traditional method of strategic planning, where what are our objectives, how are we going to achieve them, they become much less achievable. It's about scenario planning. It's about planning a future with stakeholders who count to us. And this impetus that we've had in the past to impose the will of the organisation on the outside world and on stakeholders, that is no longer possible in this new world. And therefore, new ways of working and new definitions of what it means to be a leader within a community and a network have to be thought through for us, and that's part of the work of the Global Alliance. We mustn't forget that there are many people who are still disenfranchised in this digital world. There are areas in the UK and there are areas in Spain where the coverage of networks is poor, and therefore it's digital and not just digital, and we can't forget the traditional as well. And my own government now has a phrase, digital by default. So it's automatically digital that they communicate with people from, and there are dangers in that. And they are cognizant of some of those dangers, but we too mustn't get so seduced by the digital that we forget that there's a lot of people who are not there yet, although of course we're moving in that direction. And also the issues around transparency. We know that we have to undertake radical transparency. I don't know if you were aware of the announcement from Vodafone last week. Did you hear the announcement from Vodafone? Where they are now giving an annual report on all those countries where the information that Vodafone collects about through its networks is being mined by governments. And they're naming the governments that are actually mining their information. And that sort of transparency is dangerous to them as well as a fantastic advantage to them. But transparency in what we do clearly has dangers, and it's a challenge to us that need to be thought through. And of course, need I mention crisis communication, handling crises across platforms at speed, as the Malaysian crisis indicated to us with great power, is something that's an increasing challenge to us. So what does this mean then? Well, it means, I think, that these big and small trends, there's a massive opportunity for us, but also there's a dawning realizations by chief executives and others that organizations are defined and constituted by communication, not just enabled by it. And what do I mean by that? Well, we can't manage reputation anymore. Other people manage our reputation. They define who we are. They define our place in the world. It's impossible for us to impose our reputation management on the world anymore. And what do I mean by constituted? I mean that organizations can't exist without communication. I'll say that again. Organizations cannot exist without communication. They can exist sometimes without finance. They can exist without buildings. They cannot exist without communication. So this is the realization that is beginning to be a living reality for a lot of CEOs. And there's an opportunity here to capitalize on this by not only understanding this is an opportunity for our organizations, but it's an opportunity for us to make a difference in society as well. And we've been talking about issues, and I'm going to just show you some of the issues that the World Economic Forum have identified this year. And I would point you here in this list, and it's interesting in this list how many have communication at their heart, wouldn't you agree? I'd point you to item number 7, a lack of values in leadership. And I think there's a massive opportunity for here for us. There's a requirement for a new definition of leadership that has integrity, that has values, and has listening at its core. And as Jose Manuel pointed out, the Melbourne Mandate actually began to articulate what the role of communication was in these three dimensions. And there's a dire need for us to restore and be an agent for restoring trust in the world. And these are the figures from the latest Edelman Trust Barometer, and you can see that trust in business and government is pathetic, really. And therefore, we could be agents to begin to change this agenda. And it seems to me that building on the Melbourne Mandate, which was very much about building the nature of the communications organisation, we ought to be thinking about what does it mean to be a communication leader. Not just a leader in communication, but a leader in organisation who has a clear understanding of the role of communication in leadership. And I turn for inspiration to A.J. Lafley, who's the chief executive of Procter & Gamble. These are not quite his words, but I think he had it right. In a recent article in the Harvard Business Review, he defined the role of the CEO. And I'm just giving us the challenge to say, isn't this our role? Really? 4 things to define the meaningful outside. Well, if we can't define that, and if we can't work with chief executives to define this, who can? This is our territory. The second thing he said, he didn't say actually deciding how you do business. He said defining what business you're in. Well, actually, I disagree with him because I think, that's quite an easy choice, really. But how you do business, how you interact, how you build those relationships, to me is the greater challenge. And this is where we as communicators have a profound and absolutely unique role to play in guiding our chief executives. How we behave, how we build integrity in relationships, how we listen, how we communicate, how we build communities is crucial for the future. And balancing the present and the future, well, if we're not in issues management, if we're not looking ahead, if we aren't working in slow time to predict what's going to happen in the immediate and the more distant future, who else in our organisation is going to do that? And who is going to be responsible for standards and behaviour? It's certainly not going to be the compliance department. It's going to be us, because this is about relationships at its heart. And if we're not at the centre of relationships as professional communicators, then again, what is our role? So, turning then to the World Public Relations Forum, which is in Madrid in September, if you didn't know that already, and please do come along. It leads me to what we want the output of the World Public Relations Forum in Madrid to be. Melbourne was all about the communicative organisation. Madrid is going to be about the communicative leader and what communicative leadership is all about. So I would love you to join that conversation. I would love you to be part of the discussion about what it means to understand communication as a leader, and for us to be leaders in organisations, and for us to take the true role that we have, which is not just enabling organisations in their communication, but we are there to help define the organisation, both within and without, and we're there to constitute the organisation, because communication is at the very heart of what organisations are all about. So it's a great pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to seeing you here again in Madrid in September. Thank you very much.